So as Steve was saying, TFN was founded in 1995 by Cecile Richards. That was the year after Ann lost her race for re-election against George W. And they had seen around the state this organizing by religious right groups. Now, of course, Tea Party groups we see in a lot of places. They have community groups everywhere. You have long email lists and very well connected. In the late 80s and early 90s, it was the religious right doing this. And they didn't use email, of course, back then, but they used churches as we should. They used a variety of tools for organizing these churches. There were better guys they used, but in a lot of ways, it was just barely concealed parts in organizing. And the Christian Coalition eventually got in trouble with that with the IRS, which unfortunately doesn't have much anymore. The IRS seems to offer a variety of critical things, I guess. I had actually seen the religious right begin to organize in the late 80s as a political reporter down by Houston. And when Pat Robertson ran for president in 88, there were a lot of churches that had begun politically organized, individuals within the churches. And you saw cells in different places. And in Texas, of course, where we have caucuses for presidential nominations, they were a very powerful influence that year for the first time in the Republican Party. Of course, the religious right, the world majority, had been a big part of the conservative movement since the late 1970s. And I'll tell a short story about that in a minute. But by the late 80s, Pat Robertson was really the one who taught them how to do this. And they created a workshop. They had handouts they provided. And it was almost like a little secret society thing where they would distribute these things to folks who thought like them. They would encourage them to go to the precinct caucuses in the GOP and essentially take control. And the precinct caucuses were like somebody in the county caucus or the county convention. Then that was controlled by delegates who had been picked essentially by religious writers. They would then take more religious writers on the state convention and, of course, the national convention. By 1994, they had essentially taken control of the Republican Party in Texas. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, I really mean they had taken control of the Republican Party, the machinery, the whole thing. It's fascinating because in '88, I was covering the state Republican convention in Houston, and I remember chatting with a fellow who had, in the area that I was reporting from, he had organized the Pat Robertson folks in that county. We were watching George W. about to give his speech at the state convention. Pat Robertson wasn't there. And I turned to him and I said, are you upset? Well, I would have rather Pat, be the nominee this year, but we're okay with that. We'll deal with it. I said, so are y'all going to support George W. in the general election? Or are you going to compromise here and go with this guy? He says, we'll compromise. He says, but pretty soon we're not going to have to do that anymore. Of course, they don't have to compromise in the Republican Party anymore. Their power began largely in the 1970s. I mean, I think a lot of y'all are probably well aware of this. Abortion, gay rights, really galvanized religious conservatives in ways that just had not happened before. Prior to that time, conservative evangelicals saw politics as this sort of dirty world they wanted nothing to do with. And so actually, people of faith were not particularly encouraged by these folks to get involved. They wanted to stay apart from it. They didn't want to be dirty by it, sullied by it. But in the mid-1970s, and there are various articles that have written about this, folks who had opposed integration had realized, we need to have a way to organize people here, because let's say we have people who are now going to a private Christian school because they don't want to send their kids to an integrated school. What if they lose their tax exemptions? So they said, well, how can we get people organized around this in ways that don't call us out as just out bigots? There's abortion, there's gay rights, there's all kinds of ways we can pull these folks in, politicize them, and then use them to our advantage in a lot of other ways. That sounds like a very cynical approach. That's certainly my spin on it, but it's not just mine. It's what I've read in a lot of ways and what I experienced in a lot of ways. This is what happened. We had a fella who came and speak at an event for TFN about maybe 8-9 years ago, who worked in the Carter administration. He was a faith outreach person for one, and he was their point person. And Jerry Falwell and other religious writers, he said, went to him shortly before the 1980 election and said, if Jimmy Carter will come out anti-abortion, strongly anti-abortion, we'll support him again. Of course, Jimmy Carter was famously born Christian. Evangelicals had actually supported him in large numbers in the 1976 elections. But Carter refused. By that time, or at that time, abortion rights supporters were very prevalent in the Democratic Party, but also still had sway in the Republican Party. And he saw no reason to throw them out just to get evangelicals who really had never been a very powerful party anyway. Just for principled reasons, I guess he didn't want to be hijacked or held hostage by something like that. So he said no. And Falwell and the other religious writers then fled the Democratic Party and supported Ronald Reagan instead. And the rest is history for them. But then they organized at the local level. They had a long-term project to do this. They were very patient about it. And the Pat Robertson race in 1988 was a really galvanizing moment for them. They used that, as I said, to create a model, a strategy for taking control of a political party from the grassroots up. We were very successful at that. Folks on the left and in the middle were, I think, in a lot of ways, frankly, caught unprepared by that. I don't think anyone really expected that they would become quite so powerful that they have. And we have now begun, on the progressive side of things, to organize in a similar sort of way. The Texas Freedom Network was founded as Steve said, in 1995. Cecile and Ann had seen the power of religious rights around the state in that election. And they knew that there really wasn't a counter to the religious right in Texas at that time. And so that's why Cecile founded this. It's been a long 20 years. We've won some battles and we've lost some battles. But we have grown from that time. When I started at TFN 9 years after she founded us in 2004, we had about 9,000 people, supporters in our database. We're now more than 100,000. We went from a budget, we've about tripled the budget since 2004. We have become a more influential voice, I think, on the progressive side of things, but we've also seen other organizations build in Texas as well. One of our strongest partners is the ACA of Texas. They're great partners for us. And we work with Equality Texas, and we work for People for the American Way. We work with Americans United for Separation of Church and State. All fantastic organizations. And there are a number of them that have local chapters around the state. AU in particular, I think, has chapters around the state. So we have ourselves at TFN begun to build small cells in different parts of the state to train folks how to get involved in the political process. And most of our focus has been, in the last 5 years, on youth. So today we have 14 chapters on college campuses around the state of Texas, which is a huge change for us. We also have full-time regional field organizers. Massive change for us in regions around the state. Panhandle's the only area that we're still waiting to move into. They're organizing folks. They're training young people on politics, how to get involved in the process. They're registering voters. They're working on get-out-the-vote efforts. And right now, in Houston, for example, they're heavily involved in the campaign to protect the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, which is a civil rights ordinance that protects a wide variety of categories from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. But the main assault from the religious right on that has been the protections for LGBT folks. And that has become, for them, along with abortion, well, it remains for them their main target for organizing, I think, around the country. In a lot of ways, Kathy calls them T-evangelicals. The Tea Party has become sort of their newest energy since 2010. I think a lot of folks in 2010, 2011 thought of the Tea Party as some sort of libertarian, sort of really far out there, anti-government folks. Let's keep small government, freedom for everybody. And I think probably in some states and in some areas that's what happened. In Texas, it's not what happened. In Texas, the religious right moved very quickly to, I think, co-opt the Tea Party. And today, it's really hard to see much of a difference between the two. When we go out and when we monitor, which is part of our work, we monitor right-wing groups around the state. The Tea Party and religious right are not sort of essentially the same thing. That doesn't mean there aren't some libertarian folks who are still among the Tea Party groups. That doesn't mean there are some that really are principal opponents of government or what they see as government overreach. I can disagree with them, but I can respect them at the same time for that. But I think in a lot of ways, unfortunately, the power and energy behind the Tea Party these days has become co-opted by the fundamentalists of the religious right in Texas. Whether that's true in the other states, I think that's probably true throughout much of the South. I think it's probably true in other regions of the country, maybe not true everywhere. So, what I wanted to talk about in specific today is what we have been doing in the last year, in particular, 2015. And the handout that I gave you is focuses on one of the big things that we've worked on. This year, we have seen probably one of the greatest assaults on civil liberties and true religious freedom in this country in my lifetime. Now, I don't like to use the word dangerous in these kinds of things. I hear politicians and political activists use that all the time. It's a loaded word, but I'll tell you, I'm going to use the word. I don't think we've ever had the kind of danger for civil liberties, constitutional liberties as we see today. And that's because a fundamental right in this country, religious freedom, is being completely destroyed and misused to promote a political agenda. Now, the way I see it, religious freedom, I'm a person of faith, I was raised Catholic. Religious freedom means the right to exercise your faith as you see fit, without government interference or interference with anybody else for that matter. It also means the freedom, contrary to what Greg Perry says, to be free from religion. That is a fundamental right in this country, not to have your tax dollars, your government out there promoting any particular faith, or for that matter, disfavoring any particular faith. Government needs to stay out all the way across the board. But what we're seeing now is that fundamental freedom redefined in a way that's never been meant to be seen. So this handout kind of goes through some of those. Pull my eyes to see some of this. The first thing I want to do, there are a variety of areas that we're seeing is happening right now. This redefinition of what religious freedom means. And the biggest area so far has been, of course, after the Supreme Court ruled in June that same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry, that, or at least laws and bans against it have no constitutional basis. So we saw in Texas, even before that passed, more than 20 bills offered in the Texas legislature that were promoted and in some cases even required discrimination against LGBT people. We beat every one of them, which I say that we, TFN and the groups that we work with, ACA Texas, Quality Texas, we're very proud to partner with all of them. And I have to tell you, going into the session, I did not expect us to win on all of those bills. I thought we'd probably beat some, because some sort of eat their own as it goes through the legislature. They drop some off so they can focus on others and those become the big bill they push to get through. We beat them all. The one bill that passed, we got it. This so-called pastor protection bill essentially says what the First Amendment of the Constitution has always said. Pastors and other clergy are not required to perform religious ceremonies to solemnize or celebrate a wedding that violates the religious beliefs. Well, yeah, the Constitution has always protected that. Roman Catholic priests are not required to marry divorced Catholics. No one forces them to do it. But they wanted the law as originally written to say that any religious person who had an objection could refuse to provide any service in any way related to a same-sex wedding. No, we can't do that. In this country, we decided a long time ago that once you enter the marketplace, you must treat everybody as equal under the law, regardless of who they are, who they love, what they look like, what they believe. That's just the law of this land, and we opposed that and got that part actually straightened out. The religious right's been running around claiming that,
Is the objection just to same-sex marriages, or is it to any marriage in a form that they are used to?
Their focus in all the testimony of the legislature was on same-sex marriage. But see, that's sort of trickier. Once you open the door, and I'll get to that in a minute, once you open the door to discrimination against some, who knows where it's going to go. So, religious right groups have been running around since then claiming this great victory in the legislature. And they have different media events and town hall meetings across the state claiming this great victory. And we just sort of shrugged at that, saying, it's no great victory. If it was, you won that victory in 1789. I mean, or 1790 when it has the First Amendment. And this is not a big deal. But good for you. We don't oppose that. Clergy can choose to marry who they want to marry. But they've also begun to lie about it. And they now are also saying that the law protects any religious person who wants to object. No, that's not what the bill says. That's the part that we got to straight out. So we'll have to fight that. And the reason we'll have to fight that is because we have a governor and an attorney general, frankly, who are, let's see how to say this.
Be polite. If possible.
Who have either fundamentally bought into the idea that the First Amendment means something that it really doesn't, or the biggest cynical bastards we've ever seen. And they have, one of the first things that Greg Abbott did after the Supreme Court ruling was issue a kind of a note, I guess, a memo to all state agency directors telling them to preserve religious liberty in their agencies when implementing the new law of the land, which is same-sex couples can get married. Well, what does that mean, preserving religious liberty? Does that mean that as a state official you can just say, no, that's against my religion, I'm not going to provide any support for this or do no job? Ken Paxton sent out an opinion. Record time, let me tell you. Normally when an opinion is asked from the AG, it can take weeks and months. Within days, after Dan Patrick asked the Attorney General to clarify what a same-sex marriage ruling would mean for the state, Paxton came out and essentially encouraged public officials across the state of Texas to, if they wanted to, deny licenses to same-sex couples, to refuse to perform ceremonies, to essentially refuse to do their job. So we leapt into action at that. ACLU of Texas leapt into action at that. Well, the Texas was heavily involved, obviously. Today, of the 254 counties, only 2 have yet to affirm that they will obey the law. Erie County, which is near San Angelo, and Loving County in West Texas, Park Peak, West Texas. Both of them are tiny counties. They haven't had anybody yet come before them to ask for a marriage license, same-sex couple, so it hasn't yet been challenged in those counties because they're so tiny. But they are the only 2 that have yet to affirm that they will obey the law and issue marriage licenses.
How is that affirmed? Did some outside group ask each county?
We did. So ACLU called in Texas, went county to county, essentially and said, are you going to do this? Or are you going to implement the law or are you not? Now, it wasn't easy. Hood County near Fort Worth, the county clerk there famously refused to issue a marriage license to a gay couple who had come before them for weeks, actually. At least a week or 2. After the Supreme Court ruling, eventually they had to sue. And the county backed off. The county clerk decided to go ahead and start issuing licenses. But in the meantime, the commissioner's court in Hood County had to agree to pay $45,000 in attorney fees to the gay couple who had to sue. That means the taxpayers of Hood County had to pay for the discrimination of an elected official who refused to do her job. And that will continue in any county where that happens. Taxpayers would be on the line for officials who refuse to do their job. Kentucky, everybody knows about Ken Davis, another big famous example of this. I think that fight is not over there. They're going to continue that for as long as they can. Matt Staver is the the head of a very odious group, Liberty Council. They are actually called the Southern Poverty Law Center an anti-gay hate group. They have defended Ken Davis in Kentucky. I suspect they'll continue trying to do that. I don't know. I assume some of you all read about Pope that he met with Ken Davis, and it's turned out since then that the bishop who was in charge of essentially the Vatican Embassy in Washington arranged that. There's some great question here about whether the Pope even knew what was going on before he met her. I'm not defending him. On the other hand, it does sound like he was relatively a little bit on this. Matt Staver ran out and began to scream, "This is great, the Pope is now supporting us." And the Vatican actually had to issue a statement saying, no, not quite. No one should see this meeting with her, which was one of apparently a group of 10 or 20 people, as showing our support for her. And in fact, they then said that the only formal audience that he provided during his visit in Washington, D.C. was with a gay friend in the gay friend's apartment. So that, I think, speaks volumes, frankly, for what we're seeing on the right and how they're trying to twist what actually happens. The problems, as you can see on here, are manifold. If you allow government officials to refuse to do their jobs because of their religious beliefs, who is going to not get services that their tax dollars pay for? It won't just be LGBT folks. If I'm a Roman Catholic clerk and I think it's terrible that you're divorced and you're going to remarry here, do I now get to say, I'm not going to give you a marriage license? Think about all the number of ways a police officer or a first responder deals with everybody in the community. What if they're asked to provide protection at a mosque? Well, I'm a Christian, so I think that Muslims are evil and satanic, and I'm not going to protect their mosques. You're going to send somebody else to do that. And the list is very long here. It's a very dangerous road to go down when you begin to allow government officials to pick and choose which laws they will enforce, which policies they will enforce based on their own personal religious beliefs. TFN believes if you decide to take a government position, elected or hired, you are accepting the responsibilities of that job, regardless of your religious beliefs. If you can't function in that job because of your religious beliefs, it's probably a good idea to get a different job, because you will be asked to do that, and if you don't do it, you will probably be sued. And then taxpayers, frankly, will end up having to pay for you. So if you're an elected official, you're fine. You get a bunch of angry taxpayers who are paying them to the next election.
The interesting thing was that she had been divorced, David had been divorced twice, had lived with a man out of wedlock, had 2 illegitimate children. Where is your religious conviction?
A reporter, a friend of mine, I won't say who, posted a note on my Facebook page when I noted the problems with Ken Davis. And said, I think somebody who's been divorced several times and remarried and the rest of what you're talking about probably should not be the person talking about this.
Yes, for sure.
So,
Right. But really, isn't it irrelevant what she's done? I mean, she's not doing her job. Regardless, she had a perfect, spotless, wonderful life before that.
True.
And refused to do this. Still doing wrong. So, I mean, that kind of ad hominem thing, it's very comforting for us that on our side to say, oh, well, this is a sleaze. But really, we should be opposed to that regardless of what their previous
there's no doubt about that. I think the one thing that, and I agree with that, 99%, the 1% that I'm a little unsure about is the hypocrisy part here.
Yes.
If you're going to be the public spokesperson for something like this, then it does open you up to how faithful have you been to the ideals that you're now professing now. That doesn't mean that somebody can do something in an early part of their life and then decide what I did was wrong and now I oppose that and I don't want anybody else to do it either. That brings, of course, another problem.
Well, that more to the point is the fact that the scripture she used to support her position states that marriage is between one man and one woman. I don't care whether she was divorced or not isn't so much to the point as the fact that she never I doubt that anybody who applied for a marriage license in that county was ever asked, have you ever been married before?
That's right.
That's much more to the point.
I think that's very true. I think what you normally see, that's what I said earlier, when you allow government officials to pick and choose which laws they're going to obey based on their own personal religious beliefs, you're opening the door to a very dangerous policy here. Because essentially you get down, that is a textbook example of discrimination. Let's say that tomorrow we were decided, yes, based on your religious beliefs, you can do your job this way you see fit. All right, so if you believe that there are certain things that make it a sin to remarry, either divorce or if you're same-sex couple, whatever, you discriminate against everyone here. But then now you're going to pick and choose who you're going to discriminate against. Divorced people I'll allow, even though my faith doesn't agree with this. Gay people, no, I can't allow. Interreligious couples, no, I'm not going to allow you to get married. Interracial couples, even though I belong to a sect that preaches that anybody who's not white is subhuman, I don't know. How do I do that? But you're really opening the door to Pandora's for some problems on the other way. So those are the two areas with marriage where we've really focused a lot of our work in the last few weeks. Then there is the Affordable Care Act and birth control. And this also has something to do with abortion as well, obviously. But when the Affordable Care Act was passed, it gave the administration the authority to set rules for different kinds of coverage. There are like 10 categories in coverage that all insurance is supposed to have. And the administration was given the ability to create rules to set out how that would be carried out. One of them was, of course, contraception, access to contraception. Under the ACA, women are supposed to have, all of us are supposed to have, although men don't have to get a prescription for condoms, but women in particular are supposed to have access to birth control with no coverage. Been implemented in various ways that make us wonder whether or not that's being implemented the way the law was intended, but regardless, that's what the law is supposed to do. The Obama administration created certain categories of accommodations for institutions, religious institutions like churches, synagogues. But for the most part, if you're a for-profit business, you had to provide this coverage in your health insurance. Everybody knows the Hobby Lobby case. Hobby Lobby is a closely held for-profit company, meaning essentially it's privately held by the family that started it. They oppose, they say, birth control, particularly certain kinds of birth control that they consider as causing abortions. And there's some great question in science about whether or not that objection is actually true. Regardless, it went to Supreme Court. Supreme Court came back and said closely held for-profits don't have to provide this coverage. Big problem here is hypocrisy. We found out that they have a retirement plan that invested in companies that created the same birth control medicines that they were refusing to include in their health insurance coverage. It began to look, I think, to a lot of people like this was just a selected effort to recover the Obama administration on a key part of their policy, not really some sort of principled opposition to providing birth control. Our argument has been that everybody is entitled to their religious beliefs and to live their life according to religious beliefs as they see fit. An employer, however, is not permitted, and should not be permitted, to impose his or her religious beliefs on their employees. Women should not have to ask for permission from their boss to get birth control. And when it comes down to it, a lot of women cannot afford to get birth control unless it is covered by their health insurance. A lot of women probably can. A lot of women almost certainly cannot. And if you allow private employers to make these kinds of decisions based on their own beliefs, then you're allowing employers to impose their religious beliefs on everybody who works for them. That is not religious freedom. That's never what it's meant. And that's another way that we've seen the religious right twist and distort the First Amendment to serve a political issue.
I think one of the most dangerous aspects of the Hobby Lobby decision is that anybody can claim any belief whatsoever as a religious belief, and the government has sort of said we can't judge that, right? So any religious belief, tinfoil hat or true or false or whatever.
Right. That's right. And I think the Supreme Court talked about that in their decision too. It's like it's not the government's place to decide whether or not this is your sincerely held religious belief. How does the government decide what's a sincerely held religious belief? So, if I come to you and say, well, I don't believe this, even though my life up to that point has shown completely the opposite, that means nothing. All I've done is come before you and say, my sincerely held religious belief says I object to this and I don't have to do it. And the government is not in a position, and frankly, I don't want the government in a position to determine whose religious beliefs are sincere or not sincere. But that's the trouble you get into when you begin to allow these refusals here based on religious beliefs. Is how do you do this in a way that's I think, trustworthy for one thing, and that's in conjunction with what the Constitution says on the First Amendment. And I don't think the First Amendment allows you to do something like that. The First Amendment says the government will not impose certain restrictions on you that disfavor your religious practices. It doesn't say that it's not going to ask you to obey the law that everybody else has to obey. It doesn't also say that you can then impose your religious beliefs on somebody else.
Are you aware of any cases that are coming from the Supreme Court that will readdress these types of concerns?
They're making its way through right now is a challenge from some religious nonprofits. Think of the nuns. There are some religious universities, Christian universities in Texas. So far, their challenge is that the accommodation as it is now is if you are a nonprofit, a religious nonprofit, such as a religious university or this group of nuns, and you object to birth control, you must then sign a form indicating that you object to birth control. And then at that point, the government contacts the insurer, the third party, and says, you will now provide this at no cost to the employer, and the insurer doesn't. These groups are now saying that just the requirement to sign this form saying we object violates the religious beliefs because they are otherwise facilitating providing birth control. So far, I think it's 6 federal appeals courts have ruled no, that's not true. We think this is an appropriate accommodation. Just because the third parties, you have to sign this so a third party can take it, doesn't mean that you're providing it. There's one appeals court, I think it's the 8th Circuit, that just in the last week or two ruled in their favor, however. So now we have a split among the appeals courts, and it's probably going to have to be settled by the Supreme Court. So there will be another effort by folks to go this part of the Affordable Care Act when it goes to the Supreme Court.
I followed that pretty closely, and I saw a lot of the arguments. And one thing that I noticed was sorely lacking. I was wondering if you knew that there was a reason for this. Was any American currency has a little stamp on there that says this is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and you're required by law if someone works for you to give them money. Now we stipulate. Okay, the argument, the Hobby Lobby argument. So with money, we stipulate that if you give someone money, you can't tell them what to spend it on because that's why it's stamped there on it. But why is it that we're requiring, why did that argument not come up? You can't tell people what to spend their money on because you're required by law to give them money, but you're allowed to tell them what they can use their insurance on because you're required by law to give them insurance.
Well, not an attorney, I can't claim to follow the case in the kind of detail that would probably provide me that answer, but that is a question I have in my own mind, is if the employer can say, I'm not going to provide insurance coverage, your labor benefit here. I mean, it's part of your contract of work with this person. The person's going to pay you. The person's going to provide you vacation and sick time, I hope. They're going to provide you health insurance. That's part of the contracts you have with them. If the employer's going to say, well, I'll provide you health insurance, but not for this coverage because I object to it, why can't the employer come and say, I want you to sign some document saying you won't use your wages here in a way that violates my religious beliefs? I mean, to me, that's what makes this so absurd. If you can decide what part of your employment compensation for your workers is allowable for certain kinds of things, if you can decide to impose your religious beliefs on how they use their wages, this religious freedom is being protected here. I don't think anybody's religious freedom is being protected here. What you're protecting here is the right of the employer to impose his or her religious beliefs on the people who work. So, and then the last area that we're really focused on are, and I mentioned earlier, are efforts at the local level in Texas to protect LGBT folks from discrimination. And there are efforts now to say that these ordinances violate the religious beliefs of businesses and anybody else who are somehow kept from discriminating. Which, again, it sounds to me entirely absurd. San Antonio passed it in 2013. There, I think, wasn't an effort to put it on the ballot that failed. Plano passed it. There was an effort to put it on the ballot there. It was thrown out because they essentially turned out lied to folks about what the ordinance actually said. And they didn't follow certain procedures that are put in place to safeguard the process and make sure there's no fraud involved. In Houston, they passed it in May of 2014. It was immediately challenged. Groups opposed to it began a 30-day process to gather signatures to put it on the ballot there. The city threw it out, saying that a lot of the signatures were not, in fact, valid. Supporters claim they had collected about 30,000. In fact, they expanded every time we talked to them. It's 30,000, it's 50,000, it's how many other thousand that they needed. They needed 17,000. Sort of the way the charter is set up, the percentage of who voted in the last election. The city said you didn't get enough valid signatures to put this on the ballot. So it went to a lawsuit. A local judge. It was a very extensive examination of the case. Went to jury. The jury spent a good deal of time actually going through all the complaints about what's a valid signature, what's not. There were some folks who said, there are illegible names on here. There are others that they're just a list of names all written in the same signature, in the same handwriting. There were a lot of ways in which fraud was involved, the jury found. Once they created the rules they would go by, the judge went through, had the city go through and count based on these rules of what's a valid signature and what's not. Turned out there were about 2,000 signatures shy of meeting the requirement to get it on the ballot. Again, there was forgeries in this. There were a lot of signatures that were clear that it was somebody was going down and just writing the names because it's the same handwriting. You had other places where signatures were illegible. You couldn't see, it was just sort of scribbled. And who knew if that was an eligible voter or not in Houston? There were folks apparently, I think, who signed who weren't eligible voters.
Well, Texas has a history of that.
Yeah, we have a lot of that, don't we? So the lower court said, or the city said, under those rules, you still don't qualify. The opponents then took it to an appeals court. We were waiting for that this summer. And as time went on, we realized, there was a pretty good chance that they were not going to come back and finish this entire process before the deadline for getting on the November ballot. Frankly, I think it would be a good thing if this were on the November ballot in 2016 because more people will vote. Well, in a turnout election, there's a bigger danger. Then the Supreme Court, the great appellate body in Texas, decided they would weigh in and at the last moment just issued an order. Those signatures are valid. It will go to the ballot. They took no arguments from anybody. They just issued a statement. So now in November it will go to ballot. The opponents of this so far don't seem to have a lot of money, but we don't really pull out stock in that. We suspect there'll be a lot of money for it in the last couple of weeks, and there'll be wall-to-wall TV ads. And they've already started running some radio ads. They have made the argument among themselves that this is a religious freedom issue, but their public campaign is based on fear-mongering. Essentially, the ordinance prevents discrimination against LGBT people in employment, housing, and public accommodations. They argue that last one will allow transgender folks to choose which public restroom is appropriate for their gender identity. And the opponents are saying that this will open up public restrooms being invaded by perverts who are out to rape women and children in the ladies' room. They use that language. That's just not me making that up. This is what they are saying. It is probably one of the most vile things that we've seen since the 1970s and 1980s, when that kind of stuff was very typical rhetoric you would see in these campaigns. But that's the argument they're running. They call it the bathroom ordinance. They got plans for a Houston Astro, retired Houston Astro baseball player, to do a radio ad.
Did you say retired or retarded?
Retarded.
My hearing is not that.
So he's run a radio ad for them, calling it the bathroom ordinance. Everything they say about it, they make sure you realize this is the bathroom ordinance. I have to tell you that the polling showed that's getting through. A lot of people don't know really much about Hero, but when you ask them about it, they say, oh yeah, that's the bathroom ordinance. So they have succeeded in some ways in scaring people into thinking that this ordinance is going to allow sexual predators in the bathrooms, and that women and children will be at high risk here. And that they don't ever talk about men, of course, but the implied thing is that men will also be embarrassed to find out that there's a transgender man in the bathroom with them. I frankly don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out if the person in the mural next to me is a transgender man or a cis man. It's just not an issue for me at all. So, but apparently they think that's going to be a big deal for a lot of people. They are getting some play on that. But I have to say that it's fascinating. If you look at the anti-LGBT referendum in the state in the 1970s and 80s, it was very different from this one. In the 70s and 80s, you very often did have businesses and other folks who would come out in opposition to protections. First of all, they didn't want to have to enforce these protections themselves. They thought they might be onerous. They thought they might get sued if they didn't do it the right way. Business almost across the board, business associations in Houston are supporting Hero. They see this as a very important measure that shows that Houston is a modern, cosmopolitan city. Everybody is welcome here. They saw what happened in Indiana last year or earlier this year when the legislature there tried to pass a law that essentially allowed people to discriminate against LGBT folks based on their own religious beliefs. And the uproar there that just wrecked their economy, I think, in some ways, because you have businesses saying they were going to leave there. You had conventions saying they were going to cancel their conventions there. There were folks who just weren't going to come here as tourists. They're still trying to rebuild from that problem there. And so in Houston, you're seeing a number of major business organizations who have come out and supported Hero. TFN, I'll go back to what Steve said earlier about the Faith Network. Actually, TFN was founded as the Texas Freedom Alliance. Then we were sued by Oliver North because Oliver North had an organization called Freedom Alliance. And so you can't call yourself a Texas Freedom Alliance. So Cecile had changed the name to Texas Freedom Network. And then in 1996, we created a project called the Texas Faith Network. And this was an effort to organize progressive mainstream clergy around the state who supported issues that we worked on. And it's part of the TFN Education Fund, or C3 nonprofit.
The first thing I got in the mail from anybody was the Faith Network. So I filed that one.
No, I probably would have too. But in any case, the Texas Faith Network has clergy all over the state who support the work that we're doing. A number of those clergy people have come together in Houston to support the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. So there are people of faith and religious leaders pushing back on this in Houston. But I have to say, having lived in Texas all my life and seen these referenda, I'm very pessimistic. I'm probably the most pessimistic in the office about it. Other people in the office think we're going to win. Polls show that there's general support for this, but I've also seen many polls in my lifetime that showed LGBT measures were going past. In fact, they failed because people were telling closer the truth, or they just didn't bother to vote. This is going to be a low turnout election. And so folks who are most interested in this, the most angry about it, are the ones who oppose Hero and the most likely to vote for it. But what this does is raise serious questions about protections for everyone. If we get to the point now where we can say you can refuse to provide services to somebody because you don't like the fact that they're gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual, at what point do we say you can discriminate against anyone who is a religious objection? As I said earlier, if an interreligious couple comes to you, if you belong to a white supremacy sect that teaches that whites are superior in God's eyes, can you now ignore civil rights laws that protect against discrimination based on race or for that religion, for that matter, or gender? What if you belong to a faith that teaches that women should not work outside the home, or that they should not work alongside men? If you're an employer, can you then say, I refuse to hire women, or I can otherwise discriminate against women in the workplace, because that's what my faith tells me? Once you open the door to discrimination against anybody, you're opening up the door to discrimination against everyone. And in this country, we decided a long time ago, and it was not an easy thing, as a lot of us will know and remember, we decided a long time ago, once you enter into the public marketplace, you must treat everybody who comes before you as equal under the law. Period. Period. So we'll continue to fight that. Once we see what happens in Houston, there'll be strategies involved in deciding where the next cities that we focus on. Texas does not have, a lot of people don't know this, maybe all do. There are no statewide or federal protections against anti-LGBT discrimination. And I remember visiting my folks in Waco, they're both gone now. We were going to dinner one night and they wanted to go to Cracker Barrel. And I remember when Cracker Barrel in the early 1990s sent a notice to all of its stores that said, managers, you need to find out who on your staff is gay, and if they are, fire them. There was no law that prevented this, and they did. I mean, they would call somebody in and say, you're gay, aren't you? Yes, you're fired. On the spot. It was that bad. Eventually, there was such an uproar over it, they pulled back on the policy, and I think some of the shareholders decided they were going to get killed. But I told my folks, I said, yeah, I don't want to either. They said, well, first off, people have argued that, well, they at least rescinded the policy. I said, yeah, they did it reluctantly. Why would I still want to support something like that? But regardless, they said, well, that's against the law anyway. No, it's not. So in Texas, the only protections that exist against that kind of discrimination are in local ordinances. Austin, Dallas, Houston, West Virginia, Houston, San Antonio. The major cities around the state do, but a lot of the mid-sized and smaller municipalities in the state have no protections like that at all. And even in some of the cities, they're not particularly comprehensive policies. In some cases, they'll just focus on public employment rather than any business in the community. So this will be important, I think, for us. We'll have to find out just how strong the backlash is to these. If we can win in Houston, I'm convinced we can win in almost any city in the state of Texas. Houston, after all, is a city that's refused to have zoning because Times have always claimed that it's a Marxist bloc. And if you can win something like this in Houston, my God, that's a big deal. So those are the 4 areas that we're working on these religious refusals laws. There'll be others, of course. Steve said we have an event on November the 8th here in Austin. It's our biggest fundraising event of the year. If you want to learn more about that, it's tfn.org/epic. Tickets are still available for them. I'd love to see you all there. Some of you all I have seen and have supported TFN, and we really appreciate that very much. Are there any questions I can answer? Yes, oh, I'm sorry.
If you work for a private company, you don't really have the right to freedom of speech, do you? The freedom of speech says that the government can't do anything to prevent you from speaking. But if you work for a private company, cannot that company fire you if you're saying things about the company, whether it's from Facebook or Twitter or whatever else, about that company? They can fire you. You don't have any protection under the Constitution for freedom of speech like you have in fire in a theater.
I'm not an attorney or constitutional scholar. I think that that's correct. But basically, the First Amendment protects you against the government infringing on your right to free speech. So if you're working for a private employer and you choose to say something that embarrasses your employer and puts them in a bad spot in the marketplace, I would assume they have the right to fire. Now, if they're firing you because you have done something that is constitutionally or statutorily protected, or said something about that, then yeah, you probably do have a case that you can bring before them.
But that's solely their option if you work for a private industry. Following that, should they not then have the right to say, you're gay, I'm not going to hire you? Or you're...
In Texas, they have that right. In Texas, they do have that right. I frankly think it's wrong. If you're African American, they can't refuse to hire you for that. If you're gay, I think they shouldn't be able to hire you for that or to fire you for that.
But should they be able to fire you if you're bad mouthing the company? I mean, what?
So far, I know of no protections against that. If you're bad mouthing the company, then your employer, I think, doesn't have to keep you employed. There's an interesting case right now. The name is escaping. Fox sports analyst used to play football for SMU. What's his name? Anyway, he ran for Senate in Texas a few years ago, the year that Cruz won. And in the campaign, he said a number of things that were particularly vicious, frankly, attacking the gay community in the state. And he was still a sports analyst for Fox, or he was actually hired on for Fox Sports Southwest. And Fox Sports Southwest, or the national Fox, cut him off. So this is really, we don't want somebody who's a broadcaster for us who says these kinds of vicious things. Well, a religious right litigation group has now taken him on, and they are suing Fox, saying that Fox is discriminating against him because of his religious beliefs. Because he gave people were sinners, and he said this, and they can't fire him for that. It would be a very interesting case to see how that plays out. I'll kick myself later when I remember his name, because everybody will know, as I say, that's can't do it. You have a question?
Just earlier you said that you decided a long time ago that once you enter the marketplace, you have to serve everyone.
Treat everyone as equal in the law.
Right. Is that a Supreme Court case? Or,
Well, civil rights laws passed in the 1960s, but they don't include protections for LGBT folks.
Right, so not really everyone, just the protected classes of like race and
That's right.
age and things like that.
That's right.
Okay.
So, but they're fairly broad. Because, a lot of people think that civil rights laws only protect you if you're African American. They protect you if you're white, if you're Hispanic, if you're whatever. Everybody. So, okay. Well, no, they don't protect you if you're gay. Federal civil rights law, there are no protections for LGBT folks in employment or public accommodations.
Well, kind of following question, do you see any motion toward expanding the 60 civil rights to include?
There has been an effort at the federal level for a couple of decades now to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act would provide those protections, but it's never gotten, I think it got through the Senate maybe once. But now the Republicans are in charge, they're refusing to go for a vote. There are efforts among some folks to just, instead of passing a separate NDA, to go ahead and amend the Civil Rights Statute of 1965 or 64 so that it includes protections for LGBT folks. There's some question about whether that's the best strategy or not. I don't know, this is at the federal level. But there are efforts to do that, but they haven't really made it anywhere. Any effort to do that in Texas, of course, anytime soon, failed completely. But we have managed to make some progress again at the local level. But it's limited. It's mostly the biggest cities in the state. Houston was the last major city in the state to pass a comprehensive ordinance that would include something. They actually didn't have a comprehensive civil rights ordinance. There were a lot of protections all throughout the city code, but there wasn't one place where they brought it all in. So they passed this, bring it all into one, and they added new categories. Military status is one of them. LGBT is another. So there are a variety of things they've included. It virtually protects everybody in Houston against discrimination.
Why does it have to be listed individually? What happens if you want to discriminate against left-handed people? Can they not make an ordinance that says you just can't discriminate against anybody in the story?
Well, since I'm not an attorney, I can't answer that question with any authority. My guess is most people would come back and say, you've got to have some parameters here, otherwise we don't know how to enforce this.
Well, then if you have a parameter, then you have people on the outside of that parameter saying, well, I don't like Tuesday, so you're going to discriminate against me, or, all of these vagaries that could come up. But if you make a general overall clause to say, if the person is warm and mostly vertical, you can't discriminate against them. Hold it right there.
I didn't know until I came here today that TFN used to be Texas Faith Network.
Well, the Faith Network is a project of TFN.
It still exists within.
Yeah, it's not really a separate organization. It's a project that helps us organize mainstream and progressive clergy around the state. So it's not like It's not a nonprofit on its own. It's a project.
But Texas Freedom Network never was Texas Faith Network.
No, it was founded as Texas Freedom Alliance, then became Texas Freedom Network. In 1996, we created this project to help us organize progressive clergy. But it's not a legal separate entity of any kind. Sure.
When you were talking about the Hobby Lobby case, you said that people were opposed to having to sign something saying, I don't want to have to accept whatever. How do you compare that? Does TFN have any kind of comparison to a conscientious objector?
Well, that in fact is one of the arguments that's being made here, that they use that phrase, that do you have a conscientious objection to this particular policy? I think that is an argument that is worth exploring, worth debating. But I think in this case, it strikes me as more of a political argument than it is a principal argument. It also involves something that a typical conscientious objection is not. If I decide I don't want to join the service, the military service, because I'm a conscientious objector, I'm not hurting you. I'm not discriminating, harming anyone at all. I'm saying that I will not do this because I believe in nonviolence or whatever. Conscientious objection in this case means that I have a religious objection to you with all yeah, and I will now harm you in a way that the law will allow me to do. I will fire you, I'll refuse to provide you with service, I'll refuse to rent this home, I'll evict you from this home because I don't like who you are or who you love. So I think that's probably the biggest example here is in one case the conscientious objection is being used in a way that really affects you personally. The way they want to use it is as a weapon to harm somebody else.
And it was Craig James.
That's right, Craig James. Thank you.
So, who I used to, just so it's clear, so in terms of from the perspective of the federal government, then a retailer can refuse to provide services or products to a gay couple, or a gay person.
At the federal level, there's no statute at the federal level that prevents that.
Okay.
So there are a number of states, I think there are 13 states that have protections, and then there are a number of municipalities and maybe county governments that have those protections within certain states around the country, Texas being one of them. But in Texas, there's no statewide protection, and there's no federal protection in these states.